Hi, we're Kendall and Glenn, and for the last few years we've been traveling all around Australia in our 1982 van named Vance.
But recently we purchased this beautiful Land Rover behind me called Nigel. Nigel's a 1982 Land Rover Series 3. We've recently fitted him out, ready to continue our travels throughout Australia.
Come take a look. Starting at the back, we have our fridge. This is a Dometic 75-liter chest fridge. It's also able to be turned into a freezer. Right now we just have it as a fridge on both sides, but when it does get a little bit hotter, we can turn half of it into the freezer for ice, frozen berries, all that jazz. Just lifts up on either side, and you can pack as much as you possibly can in here. In our old van we had an 85-liter Bushman front-facing fridge that we love, but we do actually really love the chest freezer because you can just pack as much in there as you possibly can. When it came to the fridge, we wanted to try to make it as concealed as possible and as seamless in this design so that it's functional but still beautiful. What we decided to do was put the fridge in the back here, cut out these holes so that that's how you lift up the latch, and we glued the countertop to the top of the fridge so it lifts up nicely like that and then closes, latches down. Moving on to our overhead cabinetry, they're held in by pretty heavy duty magnets so that when we do turn a corner or off-roading, they don't just fly open. This side is mostly toiletries, shower stuff, hairbrushes, random stuff like that. And then moving on to this side, we have all of our dried goods, pastas, rice, flours, those sort of things. We made sure that we had enough so that they're all compact in there and they aren't moving around when we're driving. And then this top barrier here is actually a little bit lower than the height of the jars, so they actually stay in quite nicely. And you take them out like that. Under the back half of the couch, we have storage underneath that's just held on by a hinge at the back. Under there we have storage for things like our backpacks, bigger jacket. It's where we store our iTech World lithium battery, things like that. More cumbersome things that just need an open space to be shoved into, basically. Moving on, we have my closet. Doesn't seem like much, but it actually does fit all of my clothes except my bathing suit bag, which is under the bed. Organized with storage bags, which I think are so handy if you live in a small space. And then down below we have Glenn's closet, which pulls out the entire length of the hallway. Over here we have our cutlery drawer, our bowl drawer, and I just say bowl because that's literally the only thing that we have to eat out of. You really don't need much. And then down below there we have what we call the nook. It's sort of just random stuff that doesn't really have a home and can just live in this little cavity, like our coffee cups, a jug, our blender, random knickknacks. And then down below that, if we take this out and remove this bottom flooring, in here is sort of a secret cavity for tools, spare parts, hopefully things that we don't really need access to that regularly.
As with most long wheelbase Series 3s, the same as the nook being on this side, there is another nook on this side as well. This side particularly is more so a few different spare parts that I have, as well as also storing the water pump for our tap, which we'll go into a little bit later on. We've made it, it's a little bit harder to access, which doesn't really bother me too much because ideally, as Kendall said, we're not going to be accessing it super regularly. But I tried to make it as simple as possible while still nice and strong to be able to allow the couch to be a strong couch. So we've made this is sort of killing a couple birds with one stone really, but we still want it to be able to make down here possible to sleep in for if it's crazy windy or any sort of stealth camping or anything like that. So we got this board. It's far too nice to just be a backrest. Originally it was supposed to also be put on a swivel table, but once we did the build we realized we really didn't need it. So I've done this beautiful countertop that's now sort of just wasted. However, I did also plan this to be somewhat of a backrest for us. So that way it means that it ends up pushing out the bottom a little bit. It makes like a little bit more of a comfortable, natural kind of like lean back position as well. But then that also means that this block now can be put in this corridor on these lips here that then allow it to be able to be all the cushions spread across, and it's somewhat of a bed. It is quite small, but it is still a bed. So I just decided to make these slats I put this cross member across so that they would all move together. They're all on the same hinge. This cross member also acts as the support that ends up butting up the backrest so that it's always at that same angle, so that way when everything's all pushed together, it ends up holding that really nice angle for a backrest. But as I said, it means I can lift this up and the whole thing moves up. From here, it means I've got access to what I call our long shallow storage. So we've got an extra wall for the awning here, a couple of awning poles, I've got a water filter, plus our water system that lives in this little cubby down here. Now onto the kitchenette, my favourite part I think. All it is a nice little latch just here, pulls out the inner one, and then I've also got a bit of a magnet at the back end of the big fella here so that it's just a little bit more support, so it's not just one little latch holding the whole thing together if we're off-roading or anything like that. So just one little pull and the whole thing comes out. Go all the way out, 1 and 2. These are super heavy duty drawer slides. I think it's like 227 kilos or something. If you saw the build episode, there was a bit of a conundrum with deciding between lockable drawer slides or non-lockable. We went with non-lockable mainly because it means we would have had to have multiple little latches exposed coming out the front of the kitchenette, and we just really didn't like the look of it, so it was more just figuring out ways that we can latch it in place a little bit more discreetly. It was a bit more effort and is a little bit more annoying, however I do love the finished look of it, so there's definitely pros and cons to both. It's just a matter of what you prefer. The lockable is for sure the easiest when it comes to actually building it. Kitchen itself, got this nice little Coleman Peak 1 stove here. Got a stainless steel countertop here that's sort of more of like a prep surface for me, so if it's something quick I don't even really need to grab a chopping board. It's a super safe surface, really easy to clean, really heavy duty. Really shallow here as well, so basically all it means is just a little lift up. I've got a couple of spices. I'm storing the gas line here at the moment because there's still a few things I want to fine tune when it comes to the ease of use with the storage and the gas. But eventually I want to have a little bit more of like a spice rack holding it all in place, but it's still sort of like in the interim at the moment. A little bit at the back here that just sort of stores like the handles for pots and pans, a couple of utensils, stuff like that. Because our drawers are so small inside, I don't see the point in having a massive drawer just so you can have longer utensils, a couple, and then the rest are just knives and forks. Then this part is probably like my favorite. I have seen 1 or 2 builds with these struts before where it just lifts up and away like so. So it's definitely something I highly recommend, because one of the most frustrating things I found with our previous kitchenette is that if ever you have lift up storage like this one, let's say you're prepping something or whatever it may be and you forgot a certain spice, you forgot an ingredient or something, you need to get access inside it, you then have to move everything that you've just put here somewhere else for you to then be able to lift it up, get access to it and put it back. So this, it didn't matter too much because it is a bit simpler, but this way now I've got all this space. It means if I'm getting anything out of here, I can pop it on top. I don't need to sort of, you've got such limited space, you don't want to have to find another flat surface to put things on. So often I just dump it all on the rear facing bench seat in our old setup, but that just got super annoying and it's likely to like either damage or dirty the cushions more as well. I still wanted the top down storage though, however, because it's easily the most you can fit is top down storage without a doubt. We could have put drawers in on the front, it would have made it a lot heavier and also way more annoying to build. So this way it means I've still got as much storage as I possibly can to fill up. I'm not needing to move everything off if I need access to it, and also it just ends up being a really nice like serving space as well. The one downside I will say is that the brackets themselves do make it a little wobbly, so I was under the impression that it would be kind of like you essentially just start to lift it up and the whole thing goes, same as putting it back down, but it is a little bit more. You do need to sort of keep everything steady and lower it to make sure it doesn't sort of want to twist. But if that's the only negative for all the positives, I really couldn't care less. It's great. Now you may have noticed we don't have a sink inside or outside. However, after living on the road for 2.5 years, we really found, for us, many other people use sinks a lot, but for us, we basically barely use the sink for anything. When it came to washing anything up, you're trying to conserve water, so often we would just fill whatever we cooked with, so the pot or the pan would fill with water and soap, and then we would use that soapy water to also wash our utensils and bowls. As we said, we have a bowl, we have a fork. It's basically all we're really eating with, so it's not a whole lot to clean. So we thought there's no point in wasting counter space with putting another sink in. And then I also didn't want to have to take away extra storage for food. Obviously being such a small space, it was unnecessary. I had seen a few troopies build utilizing the cavity in the door that I had thought we might do, but the Land Rover doors are so thin, there's not even room for a cavity to put a little tap. So the next thing was, okay, you can use a hose of some kind, but I also didn't want to just get a garden hose with like a weird head on it or anything. So believe it or not, this is actually a bidet that we got from Bunnings, and a nice little mounting bracket here. So it means that when we're actually cooking out and about, that means I've always got this guy to be able to use water, pop it there when I'm not using it, and then when it comes time to actually pack it away, I've still got a nice little spot that I just slide it under here, and then it's away. I've also got the pump switch here as well, because obviously putting it in a spot like that and having a little push button to turn it on, if you're off-roading, driving, stuff moves around, the last thing we want is for the button to just be pressed and just spray everything with water. So I'll always, if we're not using it, we just turn it off at the switch, just located in the corner there. It's just a natural thing, so that way when it's out, it's on. When it's away, it's nice and hidden, and the switch is switched off.
Moving on to the front cab, what you see is what you get. It is probably the most basic I've ever seen, even in our old 40-year-old van. This is even more basic than that. We opted for these door cards from Exmoor Trim. They're specifically made for Land Rovers. This is just where we store extra like snacks for the road, sunscreen, surf wax, just random stuff that needed a home. It's just nice and organized. We also upgraded our seats from Exmoor Trim as well. Behind the passenger seat is where we have our Red Arc electrical system. We'll touch on that more in another video. We'll go into all the details, so if you are interested in that, that will come out soon. It's also where we have our manager for the electrical system, so we can always check on the status of the battery, how it's charging. Behind this seat we also have our Anderson plug, which is what we plug our 300-watt solar panel into. We usually just lead it through the window, have it out wherever it's sunny. Originally Nigel came with 3 seats, but we removed the middle seat and put it in a center console for more space. On the ceiling here we have our hat racks. These are such a game changer if you have a lot of hats. They keep them nice and sturdy and in shape, well, as much as they can be if they're not perfectly on a flat surface.
For the rooftop tent and awning, we decided to go with the Bush company, and so far we cannot fault them. Such a good bit of gear. I'm going to have another video coming out as well that's going to be a little bit more of an in-depth review of it so far, and then obviously I want to do one well down the track once it's completely well used and lived in, but so far no negatives whatsoever. We went with the 270-degree max one that ends up wrapping all the way around, and it means I'm still undercover when it comes to cooking out the back, so have no fear. I am able to be out of the elements somewhat when it comes to having an outdoor kitchenette. Our previous van had an awning, but we loved it. It looked really cool, but it was just very fiddly to set up. It was a super old school setup. We needed more storage for like all the components. It wasn't mounted on the side or anything like that. So it was definitely good, but it wasn't really meant to be absolutely hammered. So now it literally takes 20 to 30 seconds. If it's sunny, we'll get some shade. If it's raining, we'll protect ourselves from the rain. It's just so handy to have. We can't speak higher of it. Up top, we've got the rooftop tent. The biggest non-negotiable for us was being able to have all the surfboards on top and still be able to open it without any issues. I think this is probably the strongest one there is. We've got 2 logs, a mid-length and a short board. Without any question, pop it up, no worries at all. Takes 30 seconds to set up, pop in the poles. It's a super comfy sleep. As I say, so far so good. It's held up well in the wind, in the rain, in the heat. We couldn't be happier for the transition going from Vance. Obviously the biggest jump for us was going from the bed being in our van to then a rooftop tent, but it's actually been quite a smooth transition. Many people ask where Leo sleeps. Now he's got what we call Leo's lounge, which means he has all downstairs to himself, which he absolutely loves. Hey pal. Yeah. So he sleeps down here, we sleep up there, and he's eagerly waiting for us every morning when we come down to say good morning and get outside. Now often with these, people will think surely you can't fit absolutely everything in the space we've just shown you. This is somewhat true. Literally everything fits in here. We have no storage container. Our parents don't hold any of our things. Only things at the moment that are still sort of like milling about, other than extra towels and throws because we obviously have a dog food, a couple of jackets because at the moment it's super hot one day, super cold the next, and they're just kind of cumbersome to have around. And the most frustrating thing on the road, if you're a surfer, is wetsuits, fins, leashes, etc. We do have a solution for this, but sadly we haven't been able to rectify it just yet because it's basically Christmas. And essentially all we're going to be doing is where the spare tire used to sit on the back door, we're now going to use the bracket, modify it a bit, and get a toolbox. Once the toolbox is there, we'll be able to store various bits and pieces in there, and then we're also going to be able to mount our another Exmoor trim product, which is sort of like the trash bag that goes over the spare tire, but it's just going to be slightly different, mounted on the outside of the toolbox, so that way we'll have an extra toolbox for more storage, as well as then a canvas storage bag on the back of that. So that way, hopefully, it should store all of our wetsuits, wet or dry, dog food, any like miscellaneous stuff that's fine to be outside. Honestly, that's like the one main thing I miss about Vance. Our previous build was the big Yeti cooler that we had. It worked as a great seat, but also awesome storage, and it didn't matter if it was wet, anything was grubby, anything like that, you could just chuck it all in there and it just lived there for good. So that's been the one thing we've had to get around. Still waiting on the toolbox. Once that's done, we'll mount it, and thankfully that means we won't have excess clutter and everything has its place, which is pretty wild that our entire lives completely fit in here, 2 people and a dog, but we couldn't be happy with how it's turned out.
And that's our tiny home on wheels. We hope you enjoyed the tour. We're going to spend the next who knows how long exploring the rest of Australia and maybe even go internationally, so I'm sure we'll see you on the road.